The lecture hall of the Veres Academy for Interstellar Studies was a marvel of alien architecture, tiered obsidian seats curved around a central demonstration platform, its ceiling embedded with bioluminescent panels that shifted through the visible spectrum depending on the instructor's mood. Today, those panels burned a cold, authoritative violet. Instructor Kale Veyron stood at the center platform, his forearms folded in the configuration that every student had learned to recognize as displeasure. His skin, iridescent silver with faint blue undertones, rippled as he paced. He was Selvari, a species that had mastered long-range energy weapons 6,000 years before humanity had discovered fire, and he never let anyone forget it. Today, Kale Veyron announced, his voice carrying the resonant double-tone quality of his species, we conclude our unit on primitive civilizations and their self-defense mechanisms. His compound eyes swept the room, lingering just a moment too long on the back row. We will examine why certain early-stage species developed what we classify as close proximity wounding tools, crude, inefficient, and ultimately reflective of evolutionary desperation. He reached beneath the platform and produced a long, curved blade, holding it up with 2 fingers as if it were something unpleasant he'd found stuck to his shoe. The class murmured. Several students leaned forward. A Vrolkai student near the front made a soft clicking sound that translated roughly to how quaint. This, Kale Veyron said, turning the blade slowly, is a human construction. A knife. Note the simplicity. Note the crudeness. A species so vulnerable, no natural armor, no venom, no echolocation, no magnetic sense, that they were forced to extend their reach with sharpened metal. He let the condescension drip from each word like slow poison. Ladies, gentlemen, and those beyond categorization, this is what desperation looks like. From the back row, a single voice spoke. Calm. Unhurried. May I see it? Kale Veyron's second eyelids flickered, the Selvari equivalent of a raised brow. He turned toward the source. She was the only human in the room. Lyra Vera sat with her legs crossed at the knee, one elbow resting on the desk, chin propped on her fist. She looked entirely unbothered. She had the particular stillness of someone who was very comfortable and very unimpressed simultaneously. Her dark eyes were fixed on the blade with an expression that was difficult to read, not fear, not awe. Something quieter and more dangerous than either. Cadet Vera, Kale Veyron said. This is not a participatory demonstration. You're talking about my species, Lyra said simply. I figured I might have relevant context. Several students shifted in their seats. The Vrolkai near the front clicked again, faster this time. Kale Veyron tilted his head. He was not an unkind instructor by Selvari standards, but he had a tendency to treat the concept of human insight the way one treats a child's drawing, something to be encouraged briefly and then moved past. He extended the blade handle first across the platform toward her. By all means, he said. Enlighten us. Lyra uncrossed her legs, stood, and walked down the tiered steps to the platform floor. She picked up the knife with a casual familiarity that made at least 3 students flinch. Her grip was immediate, natural, thumb along the spine, fingers wrapped without hesitation, as if the object had always belonged in her hand. Kale Veyron was already opening his mouth to resume his lecture. He did not get the chance. Lyra turned the blade once in her palm, a smooth, practiced rotation, then held it up to the bioluminescent light. Instructor Veyron, she said, do you know what's interesting about a knife? It's obsolescence, he said flatly. It's intimacy, she corrected. Her voice was still calm. Still unhurried. Every other weapon puts distance between you and the thing you're fighting. A projectile. An energy beam. A guided munition. Distance is comfortable. Distance lets you pretend it's not personal. She lowered the blade and looked at the room, not performing, just speaking, the way someone speaks when they know exactly what they're talking about. A knife doesn't let you pretend. The violet panels overhead shifted almost imperceptibly toward amber. My species, Lyra continued, lived on a planet that was actively trying to kill us. Microbes, megafauna, atmospheric events, each other. We had no natural armor. No venom. No magnetic sense. She echoed his words back without mockery. What we had was a central nervous system so overclocked on threat response chemicals that we functioned best when things were worst. And we had this. She held up the knife. Which we learned to use before we learned to write. Cadet Vera. I'm getting there. She set the blade flat on her palm and extended her arm toward the class. Can anyone in this room tell me the average engagement distance in a Selvari honor duel? Silence. 40 meters, said a Dorvani student near the middle, tentatively. 42, actually, Lyra said. Reth honor combat, 60 meters minimum. Vrolkai territorial disputes, they barely enter the same room. She curled her fingers around the blade again. You've all built your combat traditions around the assumption that closer means losing. And for most species, that's true. Closer means exposure. Closer means vulnerability. She paused. Humans decided closer means winning. The room was very quiet now. Even Kale Veron had stopped moving. We didn't develop close-quarters fighting because we were desperate, Lyra said. We developed it because we noticed something. When you close the distance on a creature, when you get inside the range where its advantages don't work anymore, it panics. A mega predator built to ambush from 15 meters doesn't know what to do when you're already underneath its claws. It hasn't evolved for that. It doesn't have a plan. She looked at her instructor. We noticed that. We practiced that. We built entire martial philosophies around it. A knife, Kale Veron said slowly, is still a primitive tool compared to. Do you know how to use it? The question landed like a stone into still water. Kale Veron's forearms rearranged themselves. I am familiar with the. I asked if you know how to use it. Lyra's voice was still perfectly pleasant. Because I do. I've known since I was 9 years old. My grandmother taught me. Her grandmother taught her. You want to talk about evolutionary legacy, instructor, that right there is ours. Not the blade. The teaching. The fact that somewhere in my family line, someone decided this knowledge was important enough to pass down through every generation, in peacetime, in cities, on a planet that hadn't seen large-scale conflict in 3 centuries. Just in case. She set the knife back on the platform with a soft, deliberate click. Your species mastered long-range weapons 6,000 years ago, she said. Congratulations. You solved the problem of distance. She turned to walk back toward her seat, then stopped and glanced back over her shoulder. We solved the problem of what happens when distance disappears. You might want to think about which one comes up more often. She climbed back up the tiered steps and settled into her seat, recrossing her legs and propping her chin on her fist again. The bioluminescent panels had gone a deep, thoughtful gold. Kale Veron stood at the platform for a long moment, looking at the knife lying on the demonstration surface. Then he looked at his class, at the Vrolkai student who had stopped clicking entirely, at the Dorvani who was rapidly taking notes, at the dozen other species who were all very quietly reconsidering something. He picked up the blade. We will, he said carefully, be extending this unit by 2 sessions. He turned it over in 2 of his 4 hands. There appears to be more material here than I initially assessed. From the back row, Lyra Vera said nothing. She was already smiling.